I didn't mean to see anything. That's the part I keep going back to. Like if I repeat it enough times, it'll somehow matter. Like intention changes the outcome. Like the fact that I wasn't supposed to be there somehow cancels out what I saw and what I did after. It was a Thursday. I remember that because Thursdays were always late for me. I worked in property management, and Thursdays meant tenant calls, last-minute maintenance requests, and paperwork that somehow never ended. I was supposed to be home around 6:30. That night, I got home just after 4. No warning, no text, nothing. I pulled into the driveway of our place in Naperville, the same quiet suburban street where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine. My husband's truck wasn't there, which made sense. Mark was on a job site out in Aurora and wouldn't be back until late. He texted me earlier that morning, saying not to wait up. The house looked still. Normal. Safe. I walked in through the garage, dropped my purse on the counter, and kicked off my heels. I remember thinking how rare it felt to be home alone in the middle of the day. Peaceful, almost. I was already picturing a glass of wine, maybe a long shower, some mindless TV. Then I heard it. A sound upstairs. Not loud. Just movement. At first I assumed it was nothing. Maybe the TV was left on in the guest room. Maybe I'd forgotten something that morning. But then I heard it again. Something like a muffled laugh. I froze. My first thought was that someone had broken in. That split-second jolt of panic hit me hard enough that I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, which ended up being one of Mark's heavy-duty flashlights sitting by the door. I didn't even turn it on. I just held it like a weapon. The house suddenly didn't feel peaceful anymore. I moved slowly, quietly, my heart thudding way too loud in my chest. Each step up the stairs felt like I was announcing myself, even though I was trying not to make a sound. And then I heard it again. Not laughter this time. Something else. A soft, breathy sound. A rhythm to it. It took me a second longer than it should have to understand what I was hearing. And when I did, I felt this weird mix of confusion and disbelief, like my brain was trying to reject it before it fully registered. Because the sound was coming from Jason's room, my stepson. He was 19, home from college for the week. Mark's son from his first marriage. I'd known him since he was 14, back when I first started dating Mark. He'd always been quiet, polite, a little distant, but never rude. We weren't close, not really, but we got along, or at least I thought we did. I stood there, outside his door, frozen, listening. There was no music playing, no TV, just those sounds. And the door wasn't fully closed. It was just slightly open, enough to see a sliver of the room. I don't know why I didn't just walk away. I should have. That would have been the normal, same thing to do. Turn around, go back downstairs, pretend I didn't hear anything, give him privacy. But I didn't. I stepped closer. Just one step. And then I saw. At first, it didn't even register properly. My brain tried to make sense of it in pieces. His bed, the movement, skin, limbs, the angle of his body. It took a full second before everything snapped into place. He was alone, lying back against his pillows, shirtless, his jeans pushed down just enough, his hand moving, his head tilted back slightly, eyes half closed. I felt like I'd walked into something I was never meant to witness, something so private, it almost felt violent to see it. I should have backed away immediately, but I didn't. I stood there, watching. And that's the part I can't explain, no matter how many times I try. Because it wasn't just shock keeping me there. It was something else. Something that made my chest tighten in a way that wasn't fear. Jason wasn't a kid anymore. I knew that, obviously. But in that moment, it hit differently. The way his muscles moved, the way his jaw tensed, the low, almost helpless sounds he was making. It was suddenly impossible to see him as the awkward teenager I'd met years ago. He looked like a man, and I hated that my mind went there. I hated that I didn't look away. I hated that instead of feeling purely embarrassed or horrified, there was this flicker of something else, something dangerous, curling low in my stomach. I don't know how long I stood there. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, maybe 10, maybe less, but it felt longer, long enough for the moment to shift. Because at some point, he opened his eyes and he saw me. Everything stopped. His hand froze. His whole body tensed like he'd just been hit with ice water. For a second, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other. And I swear, in that moment, time didn't just slow down. It stretched. His face went from confusion to realization, to something else I couldn't quite name. Not just embarrassment, not just shock, something sharper, something that mirrored exactly what I was feeling. I should have said something. Anything. I should have apologized, turned around, shut the door, run downstairs, left the house, something normal, something that would have put distance between us and whatever the hell that moment had just become. But I didn't, and neither did he. We were just locked there, eyes on each other, and the air between us felt wrong, thick, charged. It wasn't supposed to feel like that. It should have been awkward, mortifying, end of story. But it wasn't, because instead of looking away, Jason held my gaze, and there was something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. Not shame, not even panic anymore. Something else, something that made it impossible for me to pretend this was just an accident. I finally forced myself to step back. My heart was racing so hard I could barely breathe. I turned away from the door like I'd just woken up from a trance, my hand shaking slightly as I moved down the hallway. I didn't run. That's the part that bothers me the most. I didn't rush downstairs in a panic. I walked, slowly, like I was trying to keep control over something that was already slipping. I made it to the bottom of the stairs and stood there for a second, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. My reflection in the window looked off, like I wasn't fully in my own body. What the hell just happened? That question kept repeating in my head, but it wasn't as simple as it should have been, because I knew exactly what happened. The real question was why it didn't feel like it was over, why it felt like something had just started instead. I heard movement upstairs a few minutes later. Footsteps. The sound of a door opening, then closing again. I didn't look up. I didn't want to. I focused on my breathing, on the sound of the fridge humming, on anything that felt normal. Then I heard him coming down the stairs. Each step felt louder than the last, and when he reached the bottom, I felt it before I saw it. That same shift in the air. I turned around. He was standing there, a few feet away, fully dressed now. But everything about him had changed. His posture, his expression, the way he looked at me. There was still a trace of embarrassment, sure, but it was buried under something else now. Something heavier. Neither of us spoke right away. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, but also something more than that.
I opened my mouth to say something, an apology probably, but the words didn't come out, because the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't avoidance. It wasn't him looking away or trying to escape the situation. He was looking directly at me, and there was no confusion left, just awareness, and something else that made my pulse spike all over again. "I thought you were at work," he said finally. His voice was steady, too steady. I swallowed. "I got off early." Another pause. Neither of us moved. The normal version of this conversation would have ended right there, maybe with an awkward laugh, maybe with one of us walking away, pretending it didn't happen. But we didn't. We just stood there, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on both of us. And then he said something that changed everything. "You didn't knock." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even said with anger. It was just a fact. But the way he said it, the way his eyes stayed locked on mine when he did, made it feel like something else entirely, like he was pointing out more than just a mistake, like he was acknowledging what we both knew, that I hadn't just accidentally seen him. I had stayed. I didn't respond right away, because there wasn't a good response. There wasn't a version of this where I could explain myself without exposing something I didn't even fully understand yet. "I'm sorry," I said finally, but it sounded weak, incomplete, because it was, and he knew it. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened slightly, in the way his eyes flicked over me for just a second, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I felt it. Not like a son looking at his stepmother, like a man looking at a woman. And that's when I realized, with a sick, sinking feeling in my chest, this wasn't going to be something we could just forget. Because whatever crossed that line in that moment, it didn't go back. It stayed there, between us, waiting. And he heard it, because something in his expression shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. "You're a bad liar," he said quietly. That hit harder than it should have. I opened my mouth to argue, to deny it again, but the words got stuck, because he was right. And the worst part, I didn't even fully understand why. All I knew was that something about that moment of stairs had gotten under my skin in a way I couldn't shake. And standing here now, this close to him, feeling the weight of his attention, it was making everything worse. "You looked at me like," he started, then stopped himself. My breath caught. "Like what?" He hesitated. For the first time since this conversation started, he actually seemed unsure, like he was deciding whether to say something he couldn't take back. But then he did. Like, "You didn't want to look away." The words landed between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. I felt heat rush to my face, a mix of embarrassment and something else I didn't want to name. "That's not fair," I said, but it came out weaker than I intended. "Isn't it?" His voice dropped slightly, and that shift, that subtle change in tone, sent something sharp through my chest, because it didn't sound like a kid talking to his stepmom. It sounded like a man calling out a woman. I took a step back, needing space, needing distance. "This conversation is over," I said, more firmly this time. For a second, I thought he might argue, but he didn't. He just stood there, watching me. And that look, the one I'd seen earlier, the one that made my stomach twist, was back. Stronger now, more certain. "Yeah," he said finally, nodding once. "Okay." But it didn't feel like an agreement. It felt like a pause, like something unfinished. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my heart racing, my thoughts a mess of contradictions I couldn't sort through. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt like I'd shut it down. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew the truth. That conversation hadn't ended anything. It had only made it real. And as I lay in bed later that night, staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside me, one thought kept repeating in my head over and over again. If this was something we were both trying to ignore, why did it feel like we were both waiting for it to happen again? The next morning, I told myself I was going to fix it. That was the word I kept using in my head, fix. Like this was something clean and simple, like tightening a loose screw or smoothing over a misunderstanding. Like all I had to do was act normal, create distance, and everything would fall back into place. I got up early, earlier than usual. Mark was still asleep, one arm thrown over his pillow, breathing slow and steady. For a second, I just stood there looking at him, this heavy feeling settling in my chest. This was my life, my real life. A husband who trusted me, a house we built together, a routine that made sense. And somewhere inside it, something had gone completely off track. I slipped out of the bedroom quietly and went downstairs, hoping for a few minutes alone before anyone else woke up. I made coffee, stood by the kitchen window, and tried to calm my thoughts. It didn't work, because the second I heard footsteps behind me, everything tightened again. I didn't have to turn around to know it was him. "You're up early." His voice was rough with sleep, lower than usual. I closed my eyes for half a second, then turned. Jason stood a few feet away, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair still slightly messy. He looked normal, like nothing had happened, like last night wasn't sitting between us like a loaded gun. "Yeah," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded slightly, like he understood more than I was saying. Neither of us moved. It was quiet except for the hum of the coffee maker. I should have kept it that way. Grabbed my mug, gone back upstairs, avoided this completely. But I didn't. "About yesterday," I started. His eyes shifted to mine immediately. There was no confusion in them this time, no hesitation, just attention. "I think we should just move past it," I said. "Pretend it didn't happen." There it was, the fix. Simple, clean, safe. At least that's what I wanted it to be. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the counter, reaching for a mug like this was just a normal morning. But I could feel it, the tension, the awareness, the way his presence seemed heavier now. "Pretend it didn't happen," he repeated, almost like he was testing the words. "Yes," I said quickly. "It was awkward, but it doesn't have to mean anything." Another pause. Then he let out a quiet breath. "I've been trying to do that," he said. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "Trying?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And there it was again, that same look. Clearer now, less guarded. "Yeah," he said, trying. The way he said it made it obvious that he wasn't succeeding. And the worst part? Neither was I. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, grounding myself in something physical. "Jason, this is getting complicated for no reason. It was just a moment, that's it." He didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down slowly. "You keep saying that," he said. "Like if you repeat it enough, it'll be true." That hit harder than I expected, because it was exactly what I'd been doing.
"I just don't see the point in making it into something bigger," I said, my voice tightening slightly. "And what if it already is?" he asked. The question hung there. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse picking up again. "It's not," I said, a little too quickly. He didn't argue. He just watched me. And that silence, that space where he could have pushed, could have said more but didn't, felt more intense than anything else, because it left room for the truth to settle in on its own. I looked away first. I have things to do today, I said, grabbing onto the first excuse I could find. I should get ready. I started to move past him, but he spoke again before I could leave. Did it bother you? I stopped, slowly turned back. What? Seeing me like that, he said, his voice lower now. Did it bother you? My mind immediately jumped to the safest answer. Yes, of course it did. It was inappropriate. But something about the way he was looking at me, steady, searching, made the words feel wrong, incomplete. It was unexpected, I said instead. His expression didn't change, but I could tell that wasn't the answer he was looking for. That's not what I asked. My heart started pounding again. I crossed my arms, more for protection than anything else. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Pushing this, I said, making it into something it's not. He took a small step closer. Not enough to be obvious, just enough that I felt it. Because I need to know I didn't imagine it, he said. That stopped me. Imagine what? His jaw tightened slightly, like he was holding something back. Yesterday, he said. The way you looked at me. My throat felt dry. That was just... No, he cut in. Not raising his voice, but firm. Don't do that. Don't turn it into something else. The air between us felt heavier now, charged in a way that made it hard to think straight. I'm not turning it into anything, I said. But even to my own ears, it sounded weak. You are, he said. You're acting like it was nothing, like it didn't mean anything. It didn't, I insisted. But my voice didn't match the words, and he heard it, because something in his expression shifted again, more certain now, more confident. You didn't look at me like it didn't mean anything, he said quietly. My chest tightened. Jason, you didn't look away, he continued, his voice steady. You didn't freak out. You didn't leave. Each word felt like it was stripping away the excuses I'd been hiding behind. You stayed, he said. Silence. I couldn't argue with that, because it was true, and he knew it. I didn't know what to do, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. That's not what it looked like. The way he said it, calm, sure, made something twist inside me. Then what did it look like? I asked. Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer, he hesitated for a second, like he was giving me one last chance to shut it down. But I didn't. And he noticed, so he said it. It looked like you didn't want to leave. The words landed harder this time, because they weren't just an observation anymore. They were a conclusion, a truth. I felt heat rush through me, a mix of emotions I couldn't separate. Embarrassment, frustration, something deeper I didn't want to acknowledge. That's not fair, I said again, but it sounded weaker now. Then tell me I'm wrong, he said. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out, because I couldn't. And in that moment, something shifted again, not just in him, in me, because the silence, the fact that I couldn't deny it, couldn't correct him, couldn't even pretend, said more than anything I could have actually said. And he saw it. I could see it in the way his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough to know. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. And then he took one more step closer, close enough now that I could feel the heat of him, the tension, the awareness that had been building since yesterday finally settling into something undeniable. This is messed up, I said, but my voice didn't carry the conviction it should have. Yeah, he agreed, but he didn't step back. Neither did I. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. This wasn't just something happening to me. I wasn't just reacting to it. I was part of it, just as much as he was. The line had already been crossed. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. It was already behind us. And standing there, looking at him, feeling that pull I couldn't explain or control, I knew we weren't going back. That night should have reset everything. Mark was home early for once, which almost never happened. He picked up takeout from this place we both liked downtown. Burgers, fries, milkshakes, and he was in one of those rare, easy moods. Talking more, laughing more, pulling me into the kind of normal that used to feel automatic. I tried to sink into it. I really did. We sat on the couch together, his arm draped over my shoulder, some random show playing in the background. He kept making comments about it, nudging me when something funny happened, like we'd done 100 times before. And I responded. I smiled, I laughed when I was supposed to, but it all felt delayed, like there was a gap between what I was doing and what I was actually feeling. Because the entire time, I was aware of something else, of someone else. Jason was across the room, sitting in the armchair, his posture relaxed, his attention on the TV. To anyone else, it would have looked completely normal, but I felt it. Every time his gaze flicked in my direction, every time there was even a second of silence between Mark's words, like something unspoken was filling the space instead. It was subtle, invisible, but it was there, and once I noticed it, I couldn't unfeel it. At one point, Mark got up to grab another drink from the kitchen. It was a small thing, something that shouldn't have meant anything. But the second he walked out of the room, the air changed. I didn't even turn my head right away. I just felt it, that shift. Then slowly, I looked over. Jason was already looking at me. Not casually, not by accident, directly. And this time there was no confusion left. No hesitation. Just that same awareness we'd been circling all day, now sitting right there between us, without anything to hide behind. "Stop," I said quietly, before I could think better of it. His expression didn't change. I didn't say anything. "You don't have to." My voice came out tighter than I intended. A beat of silence passed. Then he leaned back slightly in the chair, still watching me. "Then what am I doing?" he asked. I swallowed, my chest tightening again. "You know what you're doing." "Do I?" he said. There was something in his tone, calm, almost curious, that made it worse. "Jason," I said, my voice low, controlled. "This needs to stop." He didn't respond immediately, and that pause, that space where he could have argued but didn't, felt heavier than anything he could have said, because it meant he was choosing his next words carefully, which meant he wasn't backing down. "Then stop it," he said finally. My stomach dropped. "What?" "If you want it to stop," he said, his voice steady, "then stop responding to it." I stared at him, caught off guard by how direct that was. "I'm not—" "You are," he cut in, not harshly, but firmly. "Every time you look back,
Every time you don't walk away, you're part of it." The words hit harder than anything else he'd said, because they were true, and I hated that they were true. "I'm trying," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. "I know," he replied, and somehow that made it worse, because there was no accusation in it, no anger, just acknowledgement, like he understood exactly where I was, because he was there too. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Mark. The moment snapped instantly. Jason looked away first this time.